So finally, System Center 2019 is here. It's finally available for download, for evaluation. It's available for volume licensing customers, and it's also available for subscribers to like Visual Studio MSDN licensing as well. So you have a lot of different options there to get the product. And System Center 2019 includes a lot of various different products, just like previous System Center 2016 or System Center 1801 or 1807 that came before it. So that continue in that pattern. So we have Data Protection Manager, we have Operation Manager or SCOM, we have Orchestrator or SCO that I like to call it, or SCO. We have Service Manager, have Service Management Automation, Virtual Machine Manager, Service Provider Foundation, and Configuration Manager. So you may notice that I have a little star there next to Configuration Manager, and the reason for that is that Configuration Manager is kind of on a little bit different schedule than all of the other System Center products. So Configuration Manager is more so closely aligned with what's happening in the Windows 10 world. So as new releases of Windows 10 on the desktop side are available, Configuration Manager is more closely aligned with that, so it's on that kind of release schedule and cadence of Windows 10. Whereas everything else now is essentially moving back um, to a long-term service channel branch as being the main branch. The semi-annual channel is kind of going away. They are kind of merging the two though. So the long-term service channel branch will have like the 5 years of mainstream support, 5 years of extended support, but with the enhanced benefit of getting new update roll-ups and features roughly on a biannual basis, so like twice a year, similarly what was planned for the semi-annual channel release in the previous. So that, as I mentioned, that'll get new features as well as new security updates and things like that, roughly every about 6 months or so. So that is the suite. So let's go ahead and move on. One of the other thing I wanted to do today is kind of we want to go through and actually deploy one of the System Center products and just kind of document what that experience is like, if it's significantly different than the previous releases, and just give you a good idea of what that's like. So we're going to go ahead and start talking about some of the other products. Specifically, we're going to talk about SCOM. So let's talk first a little bit about what's new in SCOM. So this is somewhat of an eye chart here. There's kind of a lot of stuff going on in this list here, but I'll kind of try to be brief, and we'll go through a little bit of this of what's new here. So one of the first thing here I kind of want to point out, we do have new service logon is enabled by default in Operation Manager 2019. Essentially what that means is that it supports hardening of the service accounts a little bit beyond what was available in previous releases. So what this means is that one, it does not require interactive or remote interactive login rights for the service accounts anymore. So by default, it'll configure the service accounts to use service logon as the login type, instead of like allow logon locally, which was what was previously required. Other things, SQL Server 2017 support has been added, so you can deploy clean out of the box onto Server 2017 without having to like jump through a lot of hoops, or like go through 2016 first and then upgrade later. So those things have been enhanced and improved. Other things we have is new support for enhanced support in application performance monitoring, so, or APM. So you can now do things like enable APM on a SharePoint 2016 server. So that's something that's new. Improve experience for HTML5 dashboards. So there's a lot of new capabilities and things there. There's enhanced experience for alerts raised by monitors. So this has kind of been a pain point in the past. So by default in the previous releases, you could actually close a monitor that's still unhealthy. And the result of that is that SCOM will never tell you again that that object is healthy. It's unhealthy unless it went back healthy and then unhealthy again. So a lot of time administrators are not aware of that discrepancy. So a lot of time they can inadvertently mask problems that are still ongoing. So they have kind of changed that behavior a little bit, where it actually will block you from doing that incorrect behavior. and we'll actually show you like a nastygram on why you shouldn't do that and kind of give some guidance on that. Other things that's changed is the management server failover support for Linux and Unix monitoring has changed and been enhanced. So one of the problems there in previous releases is that if you were to fail over your management servers within a resource pool that have a lot of Linux and Unix systems pointing to it, after that failover, you'll get actually regeneration of the alerts that were already existing against all of those objects. So it'll kind of cause an alert storm or alert storm essentially. So that has been fixed in this release. Other things that have been changed or enhanced is some notification subscription enhancements. There have been some changes there. Ability to enable scheduled maintenance mode with SQL always on. So in previous releases, you could enable it with SQL scheduled maintenance mode, but what will happen is that whatever node was active when you created it, that's the only node that would have that configuration. So there was a manual step that you could to go and duplicate that, but it was a manual step. So this kind of has been resolved in this release where it'll kind of keep it sync automatically. You don't have to do these extra steps, or remember to do those extra steps in case you have a failover. Other changes here is that we have some Linux agent installation changes. We have some improvements in the agent initiated maintenance mode. And then finally, we have some Linux operating system support that has been added. So this is not an exhaustive list. There's actually a few more features that has been added, but a lot of those features actually came from 1801 or 1807. So if you're coming from SCOM 2016 or SCOM 2012 R2 or earlier, all of these features plus those that I don't have listed here will be brand new to you. So just keep that in mind. They do have a pretty good doc site out there. If you go to docs.microsoft.com and go to System Center, and then from there go to Operation Manager, you'll find all of the details on what's new, what's changed, and a lot of good documentation on the product in general. So moving on. Let's talk about hardware requirements. So the hardware requirements overall really hasn't changed very much from 2016. So as you can see here for management server, I was recommending as a minimum like a 4-core processor. It doesn't specify Intel or AMD, but pretty much a 4-core processor. This gigahertz. Again, gigahertz aren't equivalent across processor types within brand or for different brands. So just keep that in mind. And then memory, recommend a minimum 8 GB of memory and minimum of 10 GB of free space. So you can kind of read through that depending on what role you're going to apply. But yeah, definitely want to recommend you kind of start at that minimum for any serious type of deployment. And moving on to the server OS requirements. So as far as for the base application, it can run on top of Windows Server 2016 or 2019. And as you can see, many of the roles do support server core as well in both of those. So just depending on what mix and match roles you need to install, you have a few options there as far as what you need to do. So here we're booting into Windows Server 2019. So the first time you log into Windows Server 2019, you'll notice you kind of get this prompt telling you, hey, try managing servers with Windows Admin Center. So does not ship within the OS, but it's something that you can go and download. And if you've been kind of following this channel for a little while, I talked about Project Honolulu way back, which eventually became Windows Admin Center. So if you haven't checked that out yet, that's probably a good video to kind of go back and look at that. It has had quite a few enhancements since the last time I talked about it. So it may be a good idea to go and download whatever the latest version is now and check that out. It's a pretty cool tool for managing your servers. All right. So next thing after you're already booted into your system, you may want to go and patch that system. I'm a big fan of bringing your systems up to the latest date, especially if you're installing a brand new application of some type. So in my case, on my system, there were patches available up through March 2019. So I went ahead and allowed those patches to install, and then I was prompted to reboot my server, which I went ahead and did. So that may take quite some time for it to download the patches and then apply them. And you depending on what patches you're missing, you may have to reboot multiple times before it's all said and done. So updating in Reboot. So yeah, after those patches install, it will probably take some time for them to completely apply, and then the system will reboot. And after that reboot, we're back at the same screen again. So now we're cooking with gas. Now we're ready to go. We're ready to go ahead and get into the meat of things now. So first thing first, you need to go and get the media from somewhere. So if you're want to just evaluate it and you're not like a volume licensing customer, or you don't have like a Visual Studio or MSDN subscription, this is the next best way to get it. So you can go just log into the Microsoft Evaluation Center, maybe ask to fill out a little bit of few questions about yourself if you don't already have an account, and you go ahead, go continue, and then after you go through all that, you'll be provided with links to download any of the System Center suite of products. In this case, where we'll be focusing on Operation Manager. So these are 180-day trials, so it does give you a good amount of time to go and kick the tires and get familiar with the product before those trials expire. So next, we have some pre-work that we need to do. So one thing you definitely want to join your server to your Active Directory domain. So, and obviously if you don't have an Active Directory domain, you'll need to pre-build that first before we can go anywhere. So go ahead, build out that Active Directory environment to join your system to the domain. With at least one or two domain controllers in play. And then you also need to have a supported SQL Server available. So depending on what version of SQL Server you have out there and what's supported for SCOM 2019, you'll want to go and make sure you build that out and have it available, or like I said, use an existing one. And in my case, I'm using a SQL Server 2017 server that I already have in my environment. And for more details on the SQL Server requirements, you can go ahead and jump over to this document list here and follow the guidance there on what's needed for your SQL Server installation. Next thing, you will need to create 2 to 4 service accounts for SCOM in your domain, depending on your setup. So list here, so you have your SCOM action account, you have your SCOM data access account, there's a SCOM reader account, and there's a SCOM writer account. So 2 of these accounts can technically run as local system, but I typically recommend, and typically what I do, I will install those as a domain account. So for the purposes of what I'm doing here, we'll have 4 accounts. We will have 4 separate accounts that we'll be using. And another thing that you'll want to do is maybe create an Active Directory group for your SCOM administrator. So everyone that will be a SCOM administrator within your domain, you can place all of those users within a security group. So you have them all in one place. And optionally, so you have 2 different ways you can do that. You could put all of your SCOM service accounts in this same SCOM administrator account, or you can create a separate SCOM service account and place all your service accounts in that group. That way you kind of keep a distinction between the 2. But these accounts essentially will also need to be effectively administrators for all intent and purpose. Yeah, you can use the one, or you can go with both. In my case, I haven't decided yet. I think I'm going to go with both though. I'll use the SCOM service account group as well as the SCOM administrator group, just so I can separate those out. And then finally, you want to make sure you add these groups that you created to the local administrator group of the management server that you'll be deploying. So no, you'll want to do that as well. So you can do that just locally, just add them, or you can do something through like AD group policy to associate those credentials with the local administrator group of the system. So you have a lot of different options how you can accomplish that. You can do it manually or do group policy, just depending on your environment. All right. So that now that you go ahead and downloaded the media, you want to mount and extract the ISO. So how you do that, you just kind of go through here. So you'll, in my case, I've kind of pre-staged a folder. where I'm going to put all of my files for SCOM 2019. So it comes down as a single ISO file. So what you'll do, you'll just go ahead and mount that ISO. What you do, just go ahead and right click on it and say mount. And what that'll do, that'll go ahead and mount the ISO. You'll get a new drive letter on your system. In my case, I got a new F drive on my system. So you'll just go ahead and go into that drive, and then you'll just find a single file on that ISO. So you just go ahead and double click on that ISO, and it'll open up a wizard that go ahead and extract all of those files out to your system. So you'll just go ahead and go next through the wizard. Accept the license agreement. Go ahead and scroll through that, click next again, specify the path where you want to install. In my case, I'll be putting it on my E drive, and just say next, and then extract, and that'll go through and extract all of the files that are part of the ISO. So it may take a couple minutes for that to extract everything, just depending on the speed of your drive, speed of your systems, and things like that. So it shouldn't take very long though. So after that finish, you get all your files extracted. You just go ahead, click the finish, and then you'll browse to the path that you specified during the extraction, and then you'll see all your files listed here, and you have a little setup button here that you can go ahead and click. So go ahead, double click on the setup, and that'll bring you to System 2019 Operation Manager setup screen. So once you're on, you got that all done on the setup screen, you'll just go ahead and click install to go ahead and kick off the installation here. So you just go ahead and click install here. And now that brings us to step one of the installation. So here you'll select the features you want to install. For our purposes, we'll be only installing the management server as well as the operation console. If you want, you can go ahead and install the web console reporting server at this time as well, if you have those prerequisites available for that. But again, for my purposes right now, I'll only be installing these two roles. And then once you select those, you'll just go ahead and say next, and that'll bring you over to step two over here. So at this step, we'll go ahead and specify the installation location. And again, in my case, I'm going to use my E drive to install all of my application. Next, that'll bring us to step three. So prerequisites. So in my case, I ran into a little bit of issues here. So you probably will too. So in my case, report viewer controls, I don't have that installed. It's not part of Windows, so you do have to download and install that separately if you don't already have it installed. And the other thing, I have a pending restart pending on my system. So your mileage may vary. You may not get this one, but you will probably definitely get this one up here, that first one. So it does provide a link here. That'll provide a link over to that brings us to step four, which will provide a link to Microsoft Report Viewer 2015 runtime. So you just go ahead and download the bits for that. And then once you download, you'll quickly find out that the Prereq has a prereq. The prereq actually needs the SQL Server 2014 CLR types. So you'll need to go and also download that and then install that first. And then once that installs, you can go back and install the Report Viewer 2015. So you gotta do a little bit of jumping around. So because neither one of these are actually on the media, so you need to go out to the web, download those separately. So just be prepared to do that. So as mentioned, the prereq does have the prereq. So the first time when you go and install the Report Viewer 2015, you will receive this error that tells you that, hey, you do need the CLR type SQL Server 2014. So you can go ahead and go download those, install it, then come back and run the installer again for Report Viewer 2015. So as mentioned, once you've go ahead and downloaded all those bits for the SQL CLR types as well as for Report Viewer, you'll kind of can stage them somewhere in your folder. So I kind of created a prerequisites folder and placed both files there, and then just go ahead and jump in and go through the installation here. So as mentioned, you'll have to start with SQL CLR type. So just go ahead, double click on it, go next through the wizard, accept the license agreement, and go next again, and then install. So it's very quick installation. Doesn't ask you really any questions. Once that's done, click finish, and then jump right into the report viewer. Same thing, go next, report, next, install. It'll install pretty quickly. Just takes a couple seconds here should normally take a couple seconds. So there we go. Now that is finished, and now we're ready to go on to the next step. So now at this point, depending on what your scenario was, what prerequisite you had to fill and things like that, you may or may not need it to reboot. So if you did need to reboot, you will have to go and relaunch the setup again. And then once you get back to the prereq checks, it should be successful this time. And now you'll be ready to continue on to the next step. So that's step 7 here. So let's see here. We want to, yeah, so step 7 here. All right, so next we'll go on to go ahead, click next. That'll bring us to specify the manager group name. So here you want to give it a unique name for your environment. So you already have some SCOM environments in your environment. You want to ideally give it a new unique name that doesn't match any other environment that you currently have. And since this is a brand new 2019 environment, this second option here won't be applicable because we're creating a brand new environment. So in my case, I use LTV-2019-UAT for my manager name. But again, you can use whatever you want that makes sense for what you're trying to accomplish. All right, so that brings over to step 9, read and accept the license agreement. So there's a lot of license agreement as you're going through this. So just seeing this is evaluation software, September 2019 standard. You kind of go through, read through this, make sure you agree with it. Many people don't. They'll just kind of scroll through real quick, say, I have read, understood, agree with the license terms, and quickly click next. So you can do that too. Go ahead, read, go next. That'll bring you over to configuring the operational database. So on this, I actually encountered an error. So what you'll do here, you'll go ahead and type in the name of your SQL server. So in my case, I have a SQL server named SQL-UAT-1. So I typed that server name in, and then I hit the tab button. And what happened, it went out and went and tried to connect to that server and enumerate some information from that server, and I received an error. So the error that I received says the installed version of SQL Server could not be verified or is not supported. Verify that the computer and the installed version of SQL Server meet the minimum requirements for installation, blah, 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 firewall setting, blah, 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 right? So that's the error message that I get. So just knowing that I'm already using the SQL Server for other purposes, I know the SQL Server ports are open. So I know 1433, 1434, those are open for anyone to access. So just by me knowing that, I know that kind of rules out some of the things they're saying here, right? And other thing, I know that I'm on a SQL Server 2017. So according to the documentation for SCOM 2019, it says that it's supported. So I'm kind of immediately kind of ruling that out as being a problem. So what it turns out, the problem in my case is that the installer, while it only shows you port 1433 when it's doing this initial installation, it actually makes connections on a few other ports as well. So it'll go out and I believe it'll go out and try to hit port 135 to enumerate like the paths of where your data files and log files are. And then it also may try to use some of the dynamic high dynamic RPC ports as well. So like ports above like 49,000 through like 65,500, whatever that number is, that high level port range. So and I know those are not allowed to this particular server that I'm trying to install the management server on. So you can go and read the SQL Server requirements, it does go over a lot of those firewall rules and requirements and ports and things like that that you should have open. But in my case, I did something a little bit different. So I'll just show you what I did. It's not recommended to probably do this in the real world, but for purpose of my purposes and for ease of use, this is what I did. So let's go and show you that. So as my step 11, so this is be an optional step, so you may or may not need to do this, and actually probably shouldn't do exactly what I'm doing here. So and I do have a kind of disclaimer here. You should reference the SQL Server requirements for the detailed port info, so you can just open up the specific reports that it actually needs, as opposed to what I'm about to do here. So I do have a link there for you to kind of go and take a look at that. But let's go ahead and just show you what I'm doing here. So in my case, what I'm going to do, what I did, I logged into my SQL UAT-1 server, and then I open up the Windows firewall settings, and I'm going to create a new inbound rule. So with this rule, I'm going to actually make a custom one. And the idea here is that I will allow all programs, pretty much any port, and then I'm going to specify a specific IP address. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say, okay, essentially what I'm doing, I'm saying any communication that's originating from the IP address of my management server, I'm gonna allow that traffic in. I'm not gonna block it on the firewall, because I know one of the things, the problem, like I mentioned, is that one is those high dynamic RPC ports, as well as I believe port 135 is what I'm getting blocked on, coming when I'm trying to do the installation. So I'm just gonna make a new rule to accommodate that. So I'm just gonna name that allow SCOM 2K19-1 traffic, turn that on. And I'm gonna go and try to set up again and see, are we successful this time? All right, so after we've done that, we'll just kind of go on back to the installation and return to configure the operation database. So this time I went ahead and typed in my server name again. All right, went in and typed in my server name again and hit tab, and this time no errors, right? So I got through those firewall ports that were actually blocking me. So in my case, it wasn't an unsupported version or any of those other reasons that it said I may be having problems. It was purely firewall that was blocking me. So here you want to go ahead and by default it'll give the database name of Operation Manager. So in my screen here, we have Operation Manager and then the paths to the data files as well as the log files. So what you see here may vary depending on how your SQL Server is configured. So the drive letters may be entirely different. So after you have that, you go ahead and say next. And that'll bring you over to step 13, which is the configure the data warehouse database. So here, ideally, you probably should be using a separate server. So in a best practice, both of these servers should be clustered, like part of a cluster and separate clusters. And then ideally, again, they should be on separate servers. But for the purpose of my UAT or testing environment that I have here, I'm going to install both databases on the same server. And again, I just typed in this name of the server and hit tab to go on to the next window there. And so one change that I did make here, I'm actually made the change after the fact over here as well, is that I'm giving these instances a name that's different than the default. So on my UAT server, I actually have multiple SCOM environments, so older SCOM environments are pointing here. So I don't want the conflict with that original name. So by default, it will name the data warehouse Operation Manager DW, but I'm adding additional tag on the end of it to match the name of my management group. And then you can specify size. So I'm leaving all those at default, and then again the data file folders, the log file folders, those automatic populated based on the settings of my SQL Server. So after that, you just go ahead and go next. And now we need to configure the operation manager accounts and then also fix permissions if you need to. So if you call one of those earlier steps that I mentioned that you can have either 2 or 4 service accounts that you'll need to create. So in my example here, I just kind of just took a screenshot of what it'll look like when you initially come in here. But the actual setting that I'm using is I'm using everything here will be clicked on the main account, and then I'll put in my username and password for each one of those accounts. It is recommended to have separate accounts for each one as opposed to using like one account, all encompassing accounts for everything. I have seen some environments where people chose to do that, but don't really recommend doing that. Just recommending having a separate account for each different one so you can like separate those permissions out. So one thing that's pretty common that you'll probably get is that once you put in your credentials for all 4 of these accounts, this data accesses one will likely throw an error, depending if you didn't do some of the pre-work for granting permissions or creating groups and things like that. You may get this prompt saying, hey, one or more accounts provided could not be validated. Please provide valid username and password. So that error message is not really that useful in most cases, because that's normally not the problem. It's normally the problem is that you have not added whatever account you specify for System Center Data Access Service. It's not a local administrator on the server that you're installing. So if you haven't done that, just go ahead, go back, whatever account you're using here, go ahead, throw it in your local administrator group on the server, and then try this again, and see 9 times out of 10 you're probably going to be successful after that. So after that, you just go ahead and click next, and that'll bring us over to step 15, and you'll be diagnostic and usage data, just kind of giving you some messages saying, hey, this product may collect some diagnostic usage data, submit it back to Microsoft. Doesn't give you any option to change that behavior here, saying, hey, it's on by default. You can turn it off later, but you can't turn it off right here. It's just giving you a heads up on that. So just go ahead and say next through that. And then you have some decisions to make, Microsoft Update decisions, as far as step 16. If you want to allow Microsoft Update to download updates or not for System Center or Operation Manager. So I'm gonna go ahead and set mine as off, but you can turn it on if you want. Just be aware of, so like in previous releases of SCOM, with that on, what'll happen is that once there's a new update rollup, that update rollup will automatically be downloaded and installed in your environment. But the problem with doing that with SCOM specifically is that it doesn't fully install it. There's actually some post steps that you always need to do after that installation. And if you're not watching it closely, you could like the automatic updates could download, install that patch, and kind of leave your system in a unfully configured state until you do some additional manual steps, such as maybe running a SQL script, importing some new manager packs, and things like that. So I prefer to have that setting off, just so you can control that behavior and actively trying to do an update roll-up installation, as opposed to Windows Update or Microsoft Update pushing that out to your system automatically. So we'll set that as off, and we'll go to next, and that'll bring us to our installation summary page. And what that'll just show you kind of the details of everything that we just configured. And if you're ready to go, you'll go ahead and click install down here. And now we're off to the races. So here I like to say, just get ready to hurry up and wait. So this install will take some time to finish. So go ahead, kick that off, and it'll be a while for everything to install. So it'll go through and configure and deploy databases to the system. It'll install the management server role. It'll go and configure the data warehouse, and then it'll go and deploy the operation console, and then do some final configuration touch-ups at the end. So that'll take a few minutes or a few hours. It just kind of depends on the speed of your environment, speed of your servers, the specs and things that you gave to it. Like I said, hurry up and wait. Hurry up and wait for everything to finish. So you can probably go grab a cup of coffee or go do something else while that runs, because it will be a while. All right, so that brings us to step 19. Fun step 19. So setup is complete. 4 hours later. No, just playing. Didn't actually take 4 hours. By my count, it actually took roughly about 18 minutes for my environment. Your mileage may vary on how long it's going to take to deploy everything, but it actually took 18, about right at 18 minutes for this to deploy in my environment. So you may see at the end you are going to have a warning message on your management server, and this is not a problem. This is just, you're going to get this on every deployment, and essentially all it's telling you is that, hey, you're running an evaluation copy of Operation Manager. This is commandlet, the set SCOM license commandlet you can use to go ahead and deploy your license once you have it. And because again, this is a 180-day trial by default when you install it. But other than that, like we were successful, down here at the bottom you have a few options for either launching a Microsoft update when the wizard closes, or starting the Operation Console when the wizard closes. So I'm going to leave the start the Operation Console when the wizard closes open, and once I hit close, after a few moments, I'm good to go. I launched the console. I was able to connect. I see that my manual server came up healthy, and this install has been a success. So we're done, right? But you thought we were done, didn't you? So as I mentioned, you do want to go ahead and activate your license if you have one. Again, if this is just evaluation, you can kind of totally ignore and skip this step. But you notice in install it mentioned that you need to do it through like PowerShell and running that set SCOM license command. One new feature that they added, I don't know if I don't think it's brand new to 2019, but sometime after 2012 R2, this was added where you can actually go and activate right from the console. So what you do, once you launch the console, you'll just go to help and then about, and then you'll be presented with a screen very similar to what we're seeing here. And so once this come up, you'll see that we're in an evaluation, and then you'll just simply click activate, and they'll pop up the product key window. You just pop in your product key in there, hit continue, and then you probably want to close down your SCOM console, and then you want to restart the data access service on the server. And then once you do that, once you come back into the screen, it should this message talking about evaluation should go away, because then you'll be licensed. And so step 22, errors, more errors. It's like, why am I getting errors? I just installed this thing. But this is also quite common. So your errors that you get may be different, but you're probably more likely you're going to get this data access service SPN not registered. So you can kind of follow the details of that error message to resolve it. But essentially it's saying that the service account that you're running, your data access service account, does not have a valid SPN register that matches that account. So you can follow the details that's listed in that error message to go ahead and create those SPNs within your domain using, well, against the service account that your data access service is running against. So once you do that, the thing to be aware of is that next time SCOM data access restarts or reboots, if you're not using local system for that data access service account, you probably will still get this error again. So just be aware of that. It doesn't mean it's broke. It's just the way that they designed this particular monitor is that it seems like it always checks against the local system account if it can actually register its own SPN, and if it can't, this will fail every single time. Typically what I do after I actually fix the SPNs registered against the domain account as it's supposed to be, or against the local system account, I will go ahead and turn this monitor off, disable it through an override, because you're going to continue to see this all the time if you don't, even if you fix the problem. So just be aware of that. And then you may have like several of these operation manifest start process. You may see some of those as well. So those, what the root cause of those can vary depending on what your actual details alert says. But a lot of those errors, a lot of times, is due to lack of enough permissions for some monitoring scenarios that the action account is trying to do. So these you'll have to investigate further to remediate those. And step 23. So you're not getting off that easy. Homework and extra credit. So I actually, so there's a guy, Kevin Holman, has a very excellent article on what's next. Some post installation tasks and recommendations that you should do. Have that linked here. So it's about halfway down the page. The first half of the site is all about a quick start guide for deploying SCOM 2016 within the environment. But many of these steps and recommendations are still totally valid for SCOM 2019. So it's a good thing to go check that out and go through some of those recommendations, read through them, and things like that. So some of the things that if it's like kind of a bug fix type of workaround, some of those things, like if it's something with always on, right, you don't necessarily really need to do that anymore in 2019 to fix that maintenance mode schedule piece. But if there's permission things, you may still need to do those, and some of the other recommendations that he has listed there. Very, very good article to check out that he has there. So now are we done? Step 24. Yes, but with a but. So at this point, we have a single management server reporting in, but we don't have any agents. We don't have high availability if we need it. So you can go and install additional management servers for high availability. You can go install the SCOM reporting services role so you can run reports and things like that against the environment. You can go and install the new HTML5 web console experience. You should install the managed package you need. So for whatever core OS you need, so we do have SQL Server in the mix since SCOM runs on top of SQL Server. You should deploy a SCOM agent or a Microsoft monitoring agent on your SQL servers. You should deploy agents on servers you need to monitor. So there's a whole lot more works that follow after you have all of these pieces there. But I just kind of want to give you a really quick overview of deploying SCOM 2019 and my experience on getting that deployed out. Not too many surprises. It's very similar to what I experienced in SCOM 2016 or SCOM 1801 or 1807. These are a lot of the same steps that you need to do there, a lot of the same prereqs and requirements and things like that. When you go to push out agents, you probably will experience the first real difference if you follow like this up to 2016 versus when you're on 2019. So early on I mentioned that one of those new features is that it logs in as a service for a lot of those accounts. So probably the first time you go to try to push an agent, it probably will fail because it's going to be highly likely that whatever account you're using probably does not have logon as a service right on the servers. So you may run into that. So you may have to resolve that if you run into that particular issue. But I hope this brief training has been useful. If you have any questions, concerns, definitely feel free to leave a comment below, and I'll see you in the next one.